It's such a simple action. Turn on the tap, out comes the water. But the story behind it is a complex mix of meteorology, geography, chemistry, ecology, economics, politics, psychology, and lots more besides. Water is fundamental to life. Our bodies are 90% water. We use it in all sorts of ways, and not just for drinking. That's only 1% of what we use. In developed countries, each individual uses about 1 full bath of water a day, but that's just a fraction of what's needed to produce the many other things we take for granted. For instance, it takes about a litre to produce a single calorie of food, and 330 litres to produce just 1 litre of beer. In the end, when it's all added up, we don't just get through 1 bathful a day, we actually use 23. So what's the problem? There's lots of water out there and it's free. It literally falls out of the sky. It's part of nature, part of a natural process that's always been there and always will be. The sun heats the oceans, evaporation takes moisture up into the air, it moves over the land and falls as rain. That's the water cycle. It links oceans to the land, fills lakes, streams and rivers, which feed back into the seas. Few people give it very much thought. But we can't afford to take it for granted. We want to use water that's clean and we don't want it to run out. But at the same time, we want to enjoy rivers and lakes that are healthy and full of life. Our ever-increasing demands place an enormous pressure on the environment and water resources worldwide. With changing lifestyles, the rise in global populations, and the uncertainty of climate change, we need to look carefully at our whole attitude to water. The Macaulay Institute in Aberdeen is one of Europe's leading centres for research on land and water management. For decades, researchers here have been combining their expertise and knowledge of the factors influencing water quantity and quality, from mountaintops to seas, and from hydrology to human behaviour. This unique approach brings together under one roof all the skills needed to place people firmly at the centre of catchment management solutions. This has already paid dividends. In the 1980s and 90s, in Europe and North America, acid rain was rarely out of the headlines. Industrial processes were polluting the air, and these pollutants were being transported hundreds of miles in rain clouds, causing serious damage to pristine environments in other countries, leading to fish kills and forest dieback on a massive scale. Representatives of many countries met to try and understand what was actually happening and to find a solution to the problem. They needed evidence and informed guidance, and much of this was provided by the scientists of the Macaulay Institute, who developed and applied predictive models to assess the likely effects of any reductions in emissions.
The Institute produced some scientific research that helped to understand the processes involved and produced a tool that helped to model the effects of different policy instruments for remediating that effect and reducing the input of acidification into those environments. This was used across Europe and led to pan-European agreements that have resulted in an improvement in the quality of waters and soils in those areas.
Today, emissions are down by over 60% since their peak, and the water quality in our lakes and streams is improving. Fish populations are now more viable than they've been for over 50 years. Clear proof that if we want to develop effective, workable environmental policies, we need reliable scientific evidence. Climate change, industrial pollution, land management, urbanisation, they all affect our water environment, and we need to be vigilant to cope with these threats and with new ones at both local and global levels. It's essential to understand the complexities of the water cycle and how humans interact with it. The goal must be to get the right water in the right places and at the right times. Rivers are part of the landscape. They're intimately connected with the land, and the water that feeds them carries the signature of where it comes from. The water trickling in a mountain stream will eventually end up as part of a major river pouring out into the sea. On its journey, it'll meet similar streams, draining farmland, forests and cities. The condition of our rivers is a direct consequence of the different landscapes they've passed through. If you like, they're a barometer of the quality of our environment.
It's very important that we don't look at single issues alone. Water is used for a variety of purposes. It's used for potable supply for our drinking. It's used for waste disposal. It's used to irrigate our crops and agricultural land. It's used by industry, people who go sailing, swimming, fishing in it. And so it has a multiple of uses. And we must ensure that when we're looking at developing sustainable options for management, we look at all the issues around the water cycle.
Many of these issues happen in different places. In the uplands, the type of land and the way it's used, for forestry or grazing, for example, affects the quality and quantity of the water that moves downstream. On farmland, harmful bacteria from livestock waste can enter our rivers and coastal waters. Pesticides and fertilizers can also find their way from the land into streams and lakes. And if land isn't managed properly, this can lead to erosion. This in turn affects not only water quality, but means that we lose valuable soils. Such pollution generates extra costs, the environmental ones resulting from damaging habitats and losing species, and also significant financial costs for consumers themselves.
The operating cost within Scottish Water is around about £250 million per year. These costs are really passed on to our customers. Over the next 4 years, we are spending in the region of £2.5 billion in improving our treatment facilities and infrastructure. If catchment management was adopted widely across Scotland, we would look to see a significant reduction in our operating costs and improvement in our performance.
It's not enough just to understand the connections between land and water. We need to realise that environmental problems start and end with people. Researchers at the Macaulay Institute are unique in recognising the extent and complexity of these problems. They appreciate the need to understand how outcomes are influenced by people's behaviour and attitudes. They base their water research not only on recording accurate observations and building predictive models, but by working alongside stakeholders to provide practical solutions.
Been working on site for 15 years, so we have useful data now that can help us to understand climate change, pollution issues and land management issues.
To the Institute, the importance of increasing public awareness of water issues is vital.
80% of the supplies come from surface waters that could be at risk, and increased treatment costs could arise. So what's the science doing about it? Well, presently we're developing predictive tools to assess future scenarios of trends in DOC. We cannot manage our waters if we don't understand how we're managing our land. The two things are intimately connected, and water is the integrator.
It's no longer enough to rely on the single-issue approach of the past. Rather than focusing on quantity or quality alone, we need to consider all the water management issues across a whole river basin or catchment to find the most environmentally sound, cost-effective and socially acceptable ways of handling them. And that means in the short, medium and long term. Let's take the apparently straightforward example of controlling pollution directly entering our rivers. Historically, the major pollutants of our rivers have been the discharges from industrial processes and sewage treatment works. Over the last decade or so, water quality has been significantly improved by engineering and end-of-pipe controls. But although that's been successful, more still has to be done to meet increasingly demanding environmental legislation. Pollution from land-based activities such as the seepage of nutrients from fields and pathogen contamination from grazing livestock is widely dispersed across a catchment area. Individual sources may be small, but collectively they're very significant.
Perhaps the chemicals that are used for various agricultural use in the vicinity of where we're collecting water for our treatment works. And it can be in rural areas, for example, we have customers with individual septic tanks. There's the possibility of pollution of some of the water courses.
There are other issues as well. Oils and chemicals can be washed off the surfaces of roads or poured down drains, and all of this can be washed into the wastewater systems or even end up in your local stream. So it isn't easy to identify and deal with a single source because there isn't one. This calls for a new vision, a fresh approach. Traditional, conventional legislation won't work on its own. What's required is a set of solutions which target the hearts and minds of individuals to persuade and encourage them to change their behaviours. Simon Langan is one of a team of researchers working closely with land managers to improve catchments across the country. These practical solutions address the problems of diffuse pollution control and at the same time provide additional benefits, such as improvements in habitats and landscape and increases in the number of species in an area.
So the diversity of the vegetation in the riparian zone, you'll see it yourself,
yes,
and it's just
absolutely
incredible how that's taken off.
Originally, the farmer's fence was very close to the burn, and behind me there was direct access for cattle to get into the burn. So what we did, we approached the farmer and agreed with him that we would move the fence back from the burn about 4 metres in order to stop cattle getting in and also to stop any fertilisers and chemicals coming off the land and getting into the burn. And obviously with the advantage of reducing the pollution and eutrophication of the water. The Macaulay's role has been very significant in what we've been trying to achieve here. The initial process was kicked off with this initial bit of fencing, and we subsequently undertook one or two other pieces of work with some grant aid, which the Macaulay advised us on. But then, because of the work we had started, we were able to apply to join a rather larger European-funded scheme.
Our rivers and lakes are part of a shared resource which has to cater for a wide variety of domestic, industrial and recreational needs. We depend totally on this central feature of our natural heritage, so it's in the interest of everyone to work together to protect and preserve it.
I think rivers and lochs are very important to people, particularly to the people that live in rural areas and live around the rivers and lochs, those that depend on private water supplies, those that make use of the rivers and lochs that are close to them. Our whisky, for example, whisky production very dependent on the quality of our water. But they're also important to the people that come and visit, the tourists, people from cities that come out to enjoy our wonderful natural heritage, and of course important to the people that drink the water of Scotland.
The way forward is through cooperative management. That means working out exactly how to bring together all those who use or have an interest in managing our waters and helping them to conduct informed discussions about all our mutual interests.
I've been involved in a variety of partnership projects, and what we've been trying to do in those projects is get all the people who are potentially involved in a situation together and around the table and start talking through the different options. So that rather than one organisation coming in and saying, we know the answer and we're going to tell you what to do, we're trying to get everybody together, get them to discuss the issues and see if we can find a way forward without alienating any one set of people and saying it's all your fault.
So first of all, you're going to work as individuals, okay?
At present, in order to help with the implementation of several European and international policies, the Macaulay is working with catchment management officers and agency planners to develop some fundamental principles. These same principles will also apply to future legislation.
The particular interest of myself and my colleagues is making sure water management solutions are equitable and that people will support them, because that's the only way they will sustain through time. There are some challenges for building consensus, not least because if we're dealing with multiple pressures coming from multiple sources involving multiple groups of people, those groups of people might have very different objectives they're trying to achieve from water management. So one of the pieces of research we do is actually how you can move from what could be a conflict situation where groups want mutually opposing issues to be resolved to an issue of consensus. And there's no shortcuts. Basically involves a lot of structured negotiation and discussion so that people understand each other's interests and needs, and so that you can build a solution that suits everyone. And that's some of the social research techniques that we're developing and that we then implement with agencies.
Our focus has been on water. It's a key resource, but it can't be managed in isolation. We must manage the land and water together. It calls for a sound, informed understanding of the science involved, but also of people. Practical policies and enduring solutions depend on an informed appreciation of the importance of both these factors. It's not just a case of recognising the environmental problems. We must also appreciate that only people can deliver the solutions. That's the Macaulay approach.
Macaulay is almost unique in offering this combination of social, economic and natural science. And we do a lot of learning from each other internally, but also we can offer the package externally to our stakeholders and to agencies. So we can bring a holistic understanding of the problem rather than just chewing off one bit and leaving the rest unanswered.
By actually working together to address a common problem, then they can come up with a solution which is much more robust in a variety of situations than, for example, one scientist working on their own just in relation to one very small part of what are increasingly complex problems.
Catchment management issues are global. Water is a central ingredient to all our lives and lifestyles, and that's true across the planet. So water is important worldwide, and catchment management issues, therefore, are also worldwide issues. Our work is relevant to catchments across the world, and we work in a number of international contexts. We work with colleagues in Australia, Asia, Africa, North America and Europe, and our work is very relevant in all of those.
Right now, it's crucial for us to address the management of water in an integrated way, locally, nationally and internationally. Water is a global issue. It's never been under so much pressure.